Hey there jet ski fans, and welcome to another video. As most of you probably already know, I was out riding this Sunday. I did a little bit more testing and everything went pretty well. There was a few issues after the video that you guys just watched from last Sunday, so I thought I would do a little bit of a midweek update and kind of walk you guys through some of those problems and how I dealt with them. I also got into a few other things, and it's starting to get a little bit tricky for me to keep track of everything because I'm now going back and forth in the timeline, but hope you guys enjoy this footage. Let's go. While I was out on the water, I ended up having a little bit of trouble with my throttle cable. It started to get really sticky. At first, I thought my hand was just getting cramped because I hadn't ridden a jet ski in so long and I wasn't used to that motion, but it turns out that the elbow, there's a piece of Teflon that's supposed to be inside of the elbow so that the metal cable isn't just running on the metal stainless elbow or noodle, whatever you call it. Anyway, it was rubbing directly on the steel, which was causing it to have a whole lot of friction. It felt horrible. Anyway, I took a bicycle brake cable apart and put a new piece of Teflon in this noodle elbow thingy. And I also decided to upgrade the throttle cable with a bicycle brake cable. Nice. Buttery smooth. Okay, so I figured I would show you guys the horrible silicone job that I did and why my pump was cavitating so bad. You can see right there, there's no silicone that way, all the way around. My pump shoe is also cracked, I forgot about that. Should probably weld that up now that I have a TIG welder. How do you know when you did a crap job sealing your pump? When it pulls out without having to cut any silicone away. This pulled right out effortlessly. I had hit a rock with the intake grate and yeah, it broke the pump. So I've got a crack here and a crack here. I finished welding up my pump and I ground some of it down, stuff that I could get out with the angle grinder. So this patch is good to go. I didn't film any of the welding because YouTube will demonetize videos with that much cursing. Just kidding, it wasn't that bad. I now need to take a die grinder or the Dremel and actually remove some of that. I don't need to, but I'm going to. The back side, the welds, that one actually turned out not too bad. This one was a huge mess. I suspect there was some silicone contamination, and also it's just kind of tricky to weld cast, and it's tricky to weld cast in a corner, especially when you're not a welder, you're just some guy in a garage with his welder. I now have the welds touched up on the inlet of the pump, on the pump shoe. You can see there's one that was there and one over here, and they both look great now. I'm happy about the way they turned out. I had to remove a bunch of material around here. I welded along here just to kind of support everything while I was welding the backside. And I had to remove a bunch of material to get the intake grate to fit, and it's fitting perfectly. There's some weld beads on the outside of the pump, but they don't have to be touched up because it doesn't matter that they're there in the least. So now all I need to do is clean this up with some brake clean, let it dry off, and then install it with copious amounts of silicone. I now have the pump installed with the intake grate and the ride plate. I had to drill and tap that back hole out for 8 by 1.25 because it had been stripped out years ago when I bought it. They just had a standard coarse screw in there. I forget what it was, 1/4 and I've been using a 6mm with a nut on the other side, but I figure if I'm worried about weld getting in the way of flow, then I should probably do something about a nut being directly in the intake flow of the pump. I was just looking at my exhaust cooling lines, and I was going to take these off to see if the jets were plugged up, but they're obviously not plugged up because there's no water getting trapped in the lines. And then I noticed this line here, and there's kind of, I don't know, this white stuff, so I got looking. The white stuff turns out not to be a big deal, but then I pulled on the line and saw this. So cooling water from my exhaust is supposed to come out of here and go into my water box. And I don't know if it backfired or it's just because there's so much water pressure, but it ended up popping off. So I'm gonna have to put a zip tie on here and where this one goes on the water box. This is the original CDK2 carburetor that came off of my 650 engine on the X2. I had some issues with it and I ended up replacing it. And so I decided to take it apart and chop this piece off to see if there was any reason why it was on there. So that piece just stuck out here. So it must be to stop anything from interfering with the screws. But the problem with that is that it stops things like your fingers or screwdrivers, tools, from getting at them. I'm doing it on this carburetor first, or I did it on this carburetor first just to see if there was like a passage that went in there or something. Now that I know there's nothing, I'm going to cut my carburetors apart. I have now modified the carbs so that the screws are a lot easier to get to. As you guys can see, you can actually see the whole screw. I can turn them quite easily with my fingers. The plan was to cross drill these and put little T-handles in them. Zach showed me his, he sent me some pictures of his, and it does look like it would be a lot easier to tune. The issue that I have is that my top plate actually doesn't give me room to access these. I now have the carburetors installed after modifying them, and you can see I can actually see the two end screws here pretty easily. I can kind of see that one and the low speed screw. The PTO one, still pretty tricky to even see, but I can reach in here pretty easily and turn the low speed with a finger and a thumb. And if I reach around from the back side like this, with my left hand, I can get a finger and a thumb on that screw so I can make a fairly accurate adjustment. To show you guys how tricky it is with the airbox in place, this is not even with the lid, this is just the lower plate. I can just barely get my hand in between the hull and that plate. I'm just hanging out, doing my thing. BJ shows up with a Bombardier case. Typical Bombardier, look at this. So, I gotta do a little bit of die grind and a little bit of aluminum welding. Okay. I don't think you can ask for any better than that on cast. Well, maybe if you're a professional welder, but I'm happy with that. There we have it. There's the inside weld. I took a die grinder and made a bit of a groove, and it tied in nicely. I'm quite pleased with that. Clean it up a little bit with a wire brush now, and it should be good to go. I hit it with a wire brush, and it looks pretty good to me. As you guys saw in my last video, I had some seat falling off issues. So I've taken some advice from my viewers, and I've cross-drilled these bolts. I'm going to put hairpins in order to make sure that I can get the hairpins out and to make sure that I don't lose them. I'm using some of this weed trimmer line, which is quite heavy duty. Let's see if this works. So I've got a piece of heat shrink, fairly small stuff. Slide it on over like that, and then put it through the hairpin. Kind of bend it over a little bit, and then push the heat shrink back over the weed trimmer line. This heat shrink has the glue inside of it, so it should take a pretty good bite. All right, I've got that one on there. That's what it looks like before it's shrunk. So it's perhaps a little bit trickier to get the seat on now, but we have the seat locked in place. It is secure. The only way for the seat to come off now is if these hairpins are removed, and then the seat can be lifted up. I ran the quick release line down through the hole, and so all I need to do to remove those hairpins is give a quick tug on these lines, and then the seat can come off just as easy as that. It is a beautiful Friday afternoon, and I had some service call cancellations. I could have gone out riding and did some more testing, but he decided to take a few bits off of the X2, as you guys can see. I've got the pipe here, and I did that because I wanted to see how much water was building up in the exhaust. As most of you will know, I've got cooling going into my exhaust in two places. I'm injecting it into the stinger and into the chamber itself, and I've actually pulled it off. And as you may be able to hear, I do have some water building up in the exhaust. As of now, I have the flow control valve opened up all the way because I didn't want to chance overheating the exhaust and damaging lines or melting something else. So now I know I can gradually turn down the water feed to the exhaust and hopefully make this thing run a little bit more dry. To see how much water is in here, I'm actually going to dump it out into this Tostitos container. I'm not sponsored by Tostitos, but let's see how much water is actually in here. Doesn't look like very much, actually. Wow. That is only a couple milliliters. I thought it was going to be a few cups. I know you guys can't really see, but yeah, very little water in there. Okay, so my adjustment isn't that far off. Don't worry, nothing's wrong. I'm just doing a checkup. I wanted to remove the head, make sure that the head gasket wasn't leaking. So now when I put it back on, I won't know if it's leaking because I've taken it off. But more realistically, I just wanted to take a look at the cylinders, make sure everything was breaking in okay, make sure that there's no scuff marks or anything like that. Everything looks good so far. What I am going to do is actually remove the stator cover. I've got all the bolts off now. I'm going to remove the stator cover so that I can actually, oh, there we go. So that I can remove the O-rings because it's actually not sealed because I don't, yeah, you can see there's water on it. It's not sealed, and so I want the water to be able to get out. So I'm actually going to drill, I think, a little relief hole. I'm going to remove the O-ring, which I don't know why I put it in there. I'm going to remove that O-ring, and then I'm going to make sure that water can actually get out of here when it gets in. What we have here is a cylinder head off of the 1100 that I bought at the end of last season, and there is glue on it. That indicates that I'm going to be using it, and you might be wondering why. Well, there's actually a couple of reasons. The cylinder head that I just removed, being this one, has some marks in all of the squish bands and the combustion chambers from what looks like piston rings chewing it up. It also had some corrosion, and I was worried about the surface actually leaking. And thirdly, this is a stock head that hasn't been resurfaced. And this one, after I got looking at it more closely, has actually been resurfaced, and it looks like somebody took 25 thousandths off it. I was looking at it and cleaning it up and noticed that there's a lot less of a shoulder. So basically, we've got a high compression head here. Instead of, I was going to put this one in the mill and try to get rid of some of the corrosion and give it a nice surface. But instead of doing that on a head that's chewed up from rings getting smashed into it, I'm just going to use this one and be done with it. I'm kind of in a little bit of a rush. I'm hoping to get out tomorrow, and it's actually 5 minutes after midnight right now. I installed a ground cable on the head because I'm somewhat concerned about connectivity to the spark plugs, or a good ground to the spark plugs. I know that's kind of silly because the head sits on dowel pins, but there's a painted surface underneath all these nuts, and there's also the gasket is a metal gasket, but it is coated. So there is a small possibility that the head could have a poor connection or a poor ground. So I decided to ground the head directly to the same ground that the CDI is grounded to. So that's all grounded together now. As you guys saw, I had the exhaust apart. I've got that all back together. I've put a couple of turns on the valve, the pressure valve, this guy here, to slow the water flow down. So I'm gonna have to monitor that when I start testing. There is one thing that I'm concerned about. I put the pump on with silicone the other day, and I also glued down the hood seal last night. And the silicone still feels, not fully cured. It's been sitting for about 24 hours, a little over 24 hours now. And the stuff for the pump has been a couple of days, actually. I think it's been several days for the pump, so hopefully that is good. But the silicone not being fully cured for the hood, here's a piece of it here. I don't know if you guys can tell, but yeah, it's actually sticking to my finger, so not fully cured for sure. I don't know why that is, but anyway, I'm going to hopefully get out tomorrow and test this, and of course, if I do that, I will be shooting some video. As you guys can see, I do still have some stuff to do. I gotta get the CDI bolted down. I still need to connect the water filter, or the water line here, and tie wrap some stuff up. I think I've already mentioned this, but I'm going to be running it without the air box or anything for a couple of reasons. One is, the main reason is that I can get to the adjuster screws much easier and actually do some adjustments. And the other reason is that I did have some clearance issues with the cover rubbing on the hull here, which wore the hull and the cover. I'm not too concerned about that. I might just let it self-clearance, but for now, I'm going to leave it off. I might try doing some adjusting or figuring something out before I put it back on. But for now, I'm gonna run these open and see if we can get it tuned. I hope you guys enjoyed this update footage. That just about does it for this video. As you guys can see, I'm wearing a toque, a winter jacket, and a hoodie. We are getting a little bit of a surprise here in Calgary. We've got a little bit of a, I don't know what you'd call it, monsoon almost passing through. The rest of this week is supposed to be quite rainy and miserable, which makes my day job a little bit nasty. But we definitely need it. The farmers could use the rain and the crops, and the lakes can definitely use some extra water. As you guys saw from my video last week, water levels are extremely low. So let's hope that this the water level turns things around. Don't look too closely behind me because there are a few spoiler alerts. As I said in the first of the video, I'm jumping a little bit back and forth in my timeline, and so it's getting really hard for me not to spoil things for you guys. I'm trying to keep regular videos coming. It keeps the YouTube algorithm a little bit more happy. So hopefully that works out. Anyway, before I say something and completely screw up and have to start over, that is going to do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you're excited for Sunday video because I did get some more riding footage and some more testing done. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.